Good evening, I'm Maciej Mikos, and you're watching World News Tonight, live from Warsaw. Maybe he doesn't want to stop the war, he's just tapping me along and has to be dealt with differently, says US President Donald Trump about Russia's Vladimir Putin. We'll have more on the current state of peace negotiations in a moment, but first, let's take a look at the latest headlines. Polish presidential campaign in full swing, 3 weeks ahead of the vote. Warsaw celebrates 1,000 years of the Polish crown. And thousands queue to visit Pope Francis' tomb the day after the pontiff's funeral. US President Donald Trump believes that Vladimir Putin may be stalling the peace process in Ukraine and warns Moscow of further sanctions. Will this change in narrative mean more pressure to be put on Russia? Our chief political correspondent, Aaron Damon, reports.
As Pope Francis was laid to rest in Rome, the late pontiff unknowingly playing part in one final diplomatic act. Inside the ornate St. Peter's Basilica, US President Donald Trump and his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky back in the same room, face to face, for the first time since their February blow-up at the White House.
Really, we had a productive meeting. I don't want to go to a lot of details, if it's possible, because the questions, very sensitive questions.
Before heading to Italy, President Trump was striking a somewhat even-keeled tone.
I think Russia and Ukraine, I think they're coming along, we hope. Very fragile.
But moments after meeting with Zelensky on Saturday, Trump had more to say, writing on social media that Russian leader Vladimir Putin might not want to stop the war after all and is just tapping him along.
The only good thing about Trump is that he is completely unpredictable. And so, there might be a time where he actually gets angry or pissed off with Putin and he does something good for a change and starts supporting Ukraine.
Speaking exclusively to TVP World this week, Ukraine's ambassador to Poland put faith in America's relationship with the war-torn country.
As we feel President Trump is dedicated to reaching the peace deal, a peace agreement, or at least ceasefire, and it is very important for us because we also on the same page. So Ukrainians need peace more than any other nations in the world.
While Trump and Zelensky stole the headlines, the Ukrainian president also sat down with the likes of France's Emmanuel Macron, Italy's Giorgia Meloni, Keir Starmer from the United Kingdom, and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. Over in Moscow, the Kremlin says Putin is now ready for talks with Ukraine without preconditions.
I don't think that Ukraine should be sitting down with Russia until it promises to stop the fighting and it promises it won't invade again. And then they can sit down and they can discuss what they want to discuss. There's all kinds of issues involved in ending a war.
It's been a whirlwind week for Kyiv, from Russia's deadly Easter strikes on the capital to the US threatening to walk away completely from peace talks and reportedly proposing that Crimea should be recognized as Russian territory, something Zelensky has dismissed. The question now is whether or not this picture will be a sign of things to come. Aaron Darman, TVP World.
And despite all the diplomatic efforts, the war in Ukraine still rages on. According to Ukrainian border guard officials, Moscow has intensified its attacks in the Sumy region. We're joined now live by our Ukraine correspondent, Os Kataji. Good evening, Os. So these reports come just a day after the Kremlin claimed to have fully retaken the Kursk region. So what is the current situation?
Good evening, Matty. So the Ukrainians have pushed back and they've denied that the Russians have fully retaken the Kursk region. So I will say that is a disputed issue between Kyiv and Moscow right now. As regards to Sumy, Andrzej Duda, he's a spokesperson for the State Border Guard, says that Russia is continuously using small assault groups to poke holes, to probe Ukraine's defenses in the north of the country. So this is an ongoing situation. This was alluded to by Alexander Syrski, the commander-in-chief, a couple of months ago, saying that this was beginning. So this is a situation that isn't new to the Ukrainians to deal with, but one that they are facing as a larger threat now that the front line has been brought much closer back to Ukraine, having been pushed deep into Kursk at one point last summer. So the situation remains difficult across the front line. President Zelensky released a statement today saying he'd spoken to the commander-in-chief. He said that there had been more than 70 Russian assaults on Ukrainian positions by midday today on Sunday. So it's a difficult position for the Ukrainians to be in. Now, those assaults were mostly coming in the east of the country, in Pokrovsk, Kramatorsk in the Liman region. Zelensky, in his nightly statement, said there needs to be more pressure put on Russia to stop these assaults, saying more tangible pressure on Russia is needed to give more opportunities for real diplomacy. Back to you, Maciej.
It was Oskar Terzi reporting from Kyiv. Thank you very much, Os. Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine has dragged on for more than 3 years now, and despite Donald Trump's campaign promise to end the war in only 24 hours, Ukrainians see no end in sight, with more victims of Moscow's attacks reported every day. Now let's go to Ukraine. Correspondent Don Arleth to see what this Sunday was like in the war-torn country.
Today in Ukraine is Provody, which is a Catholic equivalent, if you will, for All Saints' Day, where Ukrainians throughout the country are going to cemeteries to pay their respects to the deceased. Now, this war has gone on, the full-scale Russian invasion has gone on for 3 years now, and of course the fallen soldiers, you can see the many, many flags behind us. Of course, there are a lot of people coming to the cemeteries to pay their respects to the fallen Ukrainian heroes. We heard some very heartbreaking stories today. Please listen to what people told us.
My son really wanted to get a tattoo, but in our family it was not allowed to get tattoos. But when he died, I decided to make a memento for myself, and now he's always with me.
Everyone cried in the afternoon, but everyone loved him.
As Ukraine celebrates Provody again this year after 3 years of war and tens of thousands of dead, with no prospect for peace in sight, there is little hope that the killing will end anytime soon. Reporting from Odessa, Don Arleth, TVP World.
In 3 weeks, Poland will elect a new president with Warsaw's mayor Rafał Trzaskowski and his main opponent, Karol Nawrocki, backed by the opposition Law and Justice Party and just recently by the incumbent president Andrzej Duda, leading the polls. Zuzanna Jurek reports on the last stretch of the presidential campaign in Poland.
On Sunday, the Polish presidential election is in full swing. The day kicked off in Łódź, where Karol Nawrocki, the right-wing Law and Justice-backed historian, threw the first punch.
The May 18 election, it's not just a choice between Rafał Trzaskowski and me, it's a competition between Rafał Trzaskowski, a product created in a political laboratory made of policy briefs and opinion polls directed by Donald Tusk, against whom stands a man of flesh and blood, elected by the Polish nation.
In Poznań, Rafał Trzaskowski, the leading candidate and the incumbent mayor of Warsaw from the ruling Civic Coalition, struck a similar note, going after Nawrocki's affiliations.
It's not really the time for Karol Nawrocki, one of the main candidates, to say without any embarrassment, I'm here by the decision of Jarosław Kaczynski, the leader of the Law and Justice Party. Ladies and gentlemen, what we need today is a Polish president elected by your votes.
Nawrocki, who claims to be non-partisan, decided to use that to his advantage.
It's important that one of these politicians has never been a hostage of a political party, and the other one is a hostage not only of businessmen in Poland, but also of George Soros and German foundations. We want freedom and sovereignty.
Especially when, in an unprecedented move, none other than the incumbent president from the Law and Justice Party, Andrzej Duda, took to the podium to anoint Nawrocki as his successor.
I will vote for Karol Nawrocki because I believe that this is a man who will strive and who will do everything to make Poland an honest country.
But while Nawrocki has gained ground in the polls in recent weeks following a highly controversial presidential debate in Kursk in mid-April, for political scientists, Duda's speech reflects his party's crisis of confidence in the candidate it has backed.
First of all, the support of President Andrzej Duda shows that the opinion polls for Mr. Nawrocki are not as favorable as the Law and Justice Party would expect. We can see that the support for the Law and Justice candidate is below the support of the Law and Justice Party.
In his speech, the Polish president also attacked the government of Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, including criticism of its taxes on the National Health Service and a perceived media grab that he said was a symptom of
cynicism and meanness cannot win in Poland. Honesty must win in Poland.
The statement did not go unaddressed by the Prime Minister.
Cynicism and meanness cannot win in Poland. Honesty must win in Poland. President Duda said today, I fully agree. We will finish what we started on October 15th.
For political experts, these types of chess moves are meant to ensure that the opinion polls translate into democratic mobilization.
What will be crucial is not only convincing the people to vote for a specific candidate, but actually to make them go to vote.
And with just 3 weeks to go before voters head to the polls, convincing them not only to cast their ballots but whose name to check on the ballot is becoming no small feat. For TVP World, Zuzanna Jurek.
Today, Warsaw celebrates the millennium of the Polish crown. Thousands of people have gathered to commemorate the events, which changed the Polish history forever. A parade of reenactors strolled through the capital city, and a special concert will mark the main event of today's celebrations. So we're joined now by our reporter, Konrad Goliński, in front of the National Stadium in Warsaw. Good evening, Konrad. So what's the atmosphere like now?
Good evening, Maciej. Well, things are just beginning. Tonight, there's going to be a huge concert here, of course, to commemorate the coronation, 1,000 years since the coronation of Poland's first king. Now, it's mainly the biggest stars in Polish pop music are going to take the stage tonight, but it's not going to be all entertainment. A lot of these performances are going to be interwoven with a lot of historical segments, reminding people of how important this event was 1,000 years ago, where Poland became basically solidified its place among the Western European nations. Now, this concert caps off a full day of events. There were a lot of activities, installations, exhibitions, and parades. The military was here, of course. We even had a flyover by F-16s over the city of Warsaw during the military parade. And also, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk made his appearance. Let's listen to what he had to say.
We are surrounded by tens of thousands of people here on Wybrzeże Kościuszkowskie on Vistula Boulevards. Really incredible things are happening. Warsaw citizens and people from all around Poland are celebrating the 1,000-year anniversary of the Polish crown. There are a lot of things to see here. I'm really touched. My grandchildren came here from Gdańsk. I lost them somewhere, but I will find them for sure. And remember, tonight there is a great concert ahead of us that will be happening by the National Stadium, followed by the drone show.
Now, Bolesław Chrobry was more than a warrior king. He was a statesman who secured Poland's place within the community of Western nations. His coronation was not just a national triumph, but a diplomatic breakthrough as Poland became a recognized part of Otto III's grand vision for a renewed Roman Empire, a federated Europe of Christian kingdoms. Now, by embracing Christianity and aligning diplomatically with the Holy Roman Empire, Bolesław laid the foundation for Poland's lasting integration with the West, shaping its identity for centuries to come. Now, at a ceremonial gathering of MPs and senators in Gniezno, Poland's first capital, Prime Minister Donald Tusk drew a powerful parallel between Bolesław's choice a millennium ago and Poland's modern choice to join the European Union. Tusk called on Poles to remember their heritage and reaffirm their place in Europe amid global current tensions. He also announced a new guiding principle for the nation, the Piast Doctrine, emphasizing independence and allegiance to Europe, but one based on strength. I'm Konrad Gorlinski, reporting for TVP World.
Some 200,000 people have attended a special mass in St. Peter's Square in Rome, one day after Pope Francis' funeral. Meanwhile, the Catholic cardinals will gather tomorrow at the Vatican to set a date for the conclave to elect the pontiff's successor. We are now joined by our correspondent, Alex Kadier, who has been following the events at the Vatican. Good evening, Alex. Are people still queuing to pay their respects to the late Pope?
Good evening. Well, the answer to that question, I can look over my shoulder. The answer is yes, and they've been queuing here at the Basilica Santa Maria Maggiore in Rome from early this morning. We were here early this morning, and we saw thousands of people waiting in line just to see the late Pope's tomb. Now, it is a very simple tomb that simply says his name in Latin, Franciscus. Those were the wishes. No decorations, no ornate gold or flowers or things of that nature. Those were the requests of the late Pope Francis, seen by so many here as a humble Pope, a low-key Pope who wanted to be close to the people rather than close to the frills and ornaments of the papacy. Now, of course, although people have come in their tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands to Rome and the Vatican to see his funeral and pay their respects, 1.4 billion Catholics around the world are now wondering who will be next. There are some potential candidates. Pietro Parolin, who was the Secretary of State for the Vatican under Pope Francis, he would be seen as a diplomat, as a progressive, perhaps moving away from some of Pope Francis's social priorities. He would be effectively the favorite, but as the expression goes, he who enters the conclave as Pope leaves as a cardinal. It is extremely difficult to predict what the cardinals will decide. We expect the conclave will start around the 6th of May. It has to start before the 16th of May. It is very difficult to predict. Despite the fact that 80% of the cardinals have all been selected by Pope Francis, that is not a guarantee that his legacy will be continued. Now, one of the candidates who seems one of the favorites is Luis Antonio Joaquim Tegal from the Philippines. He's been dubbed the Asian Francis, a progressive voice in the Philippines and in the Catholic Church. 80% of the population of the Philippines is Catholic. Very big influence of the church there. He would be the first non-European pope in 1,300 years. So too would Fridolin Ambongo Basungu of the Congo, as well as Peter Kodwo Apia Turkson of Ghana. Both far more socially conservative candidates. We have seen them talking about same-sex marriage as being intrinsically evil. That was Cardinal Basungu. Now that would be a really significant change for the Catholic Church. Again, the first non-European pope in 1,300 years. From Africa, where the Catholic Church is growing. All of these questions will be considered by the cardinals, but as you rightly said, still here behind me in Rome, hundreds of people coming to say farewell to Pope Francis. Back to you in Warsaw.
It was Alex Kadier reporting from the Vatican. Thank you very much, Alex. Two Polish nationals residing in Spain have every reason to celebrate after the events of the last night. While Robert Lewandowski had to watch his teammates from the stands, Wojciech Szczęsny helped FC Barcelona win Copa del Rey in a game against their arch-rivals Real Madrid. Sonia Gatabyszczan reports.
Chanting and cheering, fans of FC Barcelona had good reason to celebrate on Saturday evening. Their team won the Spanish Cup, Copa del Rey, scoring 3-2 against Real Madrid.
I'm very proud. I appreciate a lot what they are doing on the pitch. They never give up, and I think everyone is proud about this team. Not only I, the fans, the club, everyone.
Barcelona dominated the first half, but Real Madrid leveled up in the second, with the situation becoming particularly dangerous when Aurelien Tchouameni scored in the 77th minute. Ultimately, Barcelona's faith was saved in the 116th minute.
Jules Koundé getting that big goal ahead of the possible penalty kicks. I think if you're Polish, you were perhaps looking forward to that because, as we all know, Wojciech Szczęsny is very good at that as well.
Spain's winning team also includes 2 Polish players, Wojciech Szczęsny, the goalkeeper who was instrumental in the team's victory, and Robert Lewandowski, who had to sit this match out due to a recent thigh muscle injury.
The team made it, so maybe it's even better that he wasn't there. No, just kidding. It's good that Robert's rehabilitation is going very well, and I think he'll be ready to play soon because we need him.
Szczęsny announced his departure from football in August last year, but changed his mind after Barcelona knocked on his door, making this a unique post-retirement career.
Because when you at the end of your career, you're not expected to go to one of the best. So this story is incredible. It's going to be told for many, many years. And as I've said, for anybody that's Polish, it's an incredible story to have 2 players playing for a club like Barcelona.
With 32 wins to date, FC Barcelona is the team with the most Spanish Cup titles. For TVP World, I'm Sonia Gatabiszczyn.
Moscow declares it is ready to enter peace talks with Kiev without preconditions as Donald Trump questions Vladimir Putin's willingness to end the war. Will the US put more pressure on Russia, and has Kiev finally found a common tongue with Washington? To discuss it all, we're joined by Mark Toth, a national security and foreign policy analyst. Good evening.
Good evening, Maciej. Good to see you again.
You too. So only one day after Donald Trump stated that Ukraine and Russia are very close to a peace deal, he has changed his mind and now suspects that Putin is simply somehow trying to manipulate him. So, well, it's not the first time that we are observing a sudden change at the White House, but is this one for good? And what is the status, the current status of negotiations?
Maciej, it's a great question because I think we're still amidst what I call kabuki theater here. There's a lot of messaging going on. The media has parsed a lot of Trump's statement. They seem to underemphasize the first part of it, which was saying, look, Ukraine's not going to get back Crimea. Ukraine's not going to get back certain territories, or it implies that certain territories that Russia now controls in parts of Kherson, Luhansk, Donetsk, and Zaporizhia. And those are non-starters in terms of sovereignty, ultimate sovereignty, somehow being ceded to the Russians. Zelensky's made that clear. He's not willing to do that. Then on the flip side of that message, though, he was, as you were just pointing out, Trump was saying that he suspects that Putin may be tapping him out. So I think there's messaging to both Zelensky and to Putin to get a deal. And then subsequent to that, we've seen comments coming yet again from Secretary of State Marco Rubio saying that the U.S. believes that next week is the critical week. We've heard this before. Or that the U.S. is not going to continue these discussions. It's a waste of time. So at this point, I still think we're seeing a lot of theater, a lot of messaging. And we just, had a curveball thrown just a few minutes before I came on air here with you, where Lavrov is now claiming that Russia would agree to a ceasefire if Ukraine does 2 things. 1, doesn't accept any more armament deliveries from the West, and 2, doesn't use any kind of truce, any ceasefire to reposition or re-strengthen its forces. Basically, they're asking for a capitulation. So lots of messaging, not sure exactly yet what the substance is.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the question of Crimea. Can Kiev and Washington somehow bypass it in order to let President Zelensky, not to lose his face in front of his compatriots?
I think there's 2 sides to that question, Maciej. There's what Zelensky can afford to do from a country standpoint. Clearly, he's not constitutionally allowed, without the Rada declaring it, to cede any kind of territory. He's willing, and he says this obliquely, but he says that he's willing to talk about what, in effect, would be temporary occupation of certain Ukrainian territories by Russia as part of any kind of peace process. But he wants a ceasefire first. And then you certainly have the European side of this angle, though. In my view, and General Ben Hodges has been on your program many times, his view, we view as military analysts, Crimea as being the decisive terrain of this conflict and ultimately the decisive terrain of a conflict in the future in terms of its control over the Black Sea, in terms of it creating a land bridge if it were to be frozen as it is now for Russia at some point, like they've already done once, resume this war, to go after Odessa and elsewhere, that it could put Eastern Europe at threat. So from my standpoint, while yes, there's some diplomatic doublespeak that could be used to pave over that, I think the consequences to both Ukraine and to both to Europe are significant, and that we shouldn't take this lightly. Now, Trump wants to get there. He's made it very clear in his statement in a Time Inc. interview that it's crazy to think that Ukraine would get Crimea back, that basically it's de facto Russian now. I don't think either Ukraine nor Europe should accept that, and especially your country, Poland. Ultimately, that would be strategically very dangerous for you to do that. And Poland should be saying, no, look, Ukraine should not be put in this position where they have to cede any of its territory on a permanent basis.
Right. Now, do you believe that a true miracle happened and something has indeed changed in Rome in relations between President Zelensky and Trump?
I'd like to believe, as a devout Christian myself, I'd like to believe that that kind of a miracle happens. However, again, I think it's a question of optics. It's staging. It's a presidential moment. It's good for photographs. It's good for media analysts like me to speculate about. But what I really want to see is the nuts and bolts on the ground. Until I see Trump actually implementing sanctions, if Russia doesn't get to the table sooner as opposed to later and accepts a complete ceasefire, which is what Trump initially done, I'm going to be hesitant to believe it. Right now, what we're seeing is the U.S. is still stalling on some intel sharing. They're still not approving new packages, military aids and weapons. Europe, in turn, is being forced to step up and do that in lieu of. And Russia continues to attack Ukrainian civilians intentionally. We just see the creepy rees repeated over and over again, be it in Sumy and Kiev. I wouldn't be shocked if we see it in Lviv again. All of these things are just indicative that while the optics are there and it's hopeful that there's some kind of miracle that can be had, unfortunately, the things that are happening on the ground, the reality of the ground, is that we're still in this. And I'd add really quickly here, I think even this point that Lavrov made, I'd beware of that. Beware of a Russian Trojan horse here, because every indication still is that Russia is preparing for an offensive either in the summer or in the fall now of 2025. And it looks like we're detecting changes on the battlefield, wider usage of motorcycles, et cetera, to defeat drones, that the Russians are looking for different ways of advancing in a drone environment type warfare. So I see the optics of it. You're right to point it out. The media is right to notice it. But unfortunately, when you get down to the detail and you look at the grassroots level, I don't see anything substantively changing yet.
And lastly, briefly, Donald Trump has mentioned sanctions on Russia. Now, what measures can he, in fact, introduce that would be any different from what Joe Biden has already done for Ukraine and, well, for them to have a bigger impact on the current situation?
Right. If he were to go there, he certainly could choke off the rest of Russia's ability to do transnational transactions. That would be one way. He certainly could go after the shadow fleet that is funding most of Russia's war at this point in terms of transporting oil around the world. But sanctions in and of itself are not going to be enough. In my opinion, that's just going to be more cosmetic. China would make up for that. I think for Trump, if he's going to have any significant action to be able to move Putin off of where he's at, it's going to take a kinetic punch to the face of Russia. And that's going to mean upping the weapons supply, munitions supply, taking the handcuffs off of Ukraine to actually go and interdict in the deep fight so that they can start winning these close fights. It's going to have to be kinetic, in my view, unfortunately, tragically for the people involved. But I don't think sanctions will be enough.
Mark Toth, National Security and Foreign Policy Analyst, was our guest tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maciej, and happy 1,000 years to you and your country persons.
Thank you. And thank you for watching, and stay with us for much more news and features here on TVP World.